promised, I decided that I better get this in because I told you I would before the end of the term. This business of putting all the different restrictions on what a user can do depending on their authorization level, like administrator, supervisor, et cetera, right? Yeah, we've gone over this. We got all the code in place. And what we have done is the actual important part, right? We have all the restrictions in place in the controllers so that people can't do things they aren't authorized to do, depending on what roles they're in and so on and so forth. But something that's been, kind of left hanging out there, when you tempt users to do something and then just tell them, not authorized, that can be very kind of frustrating. Doesn't make a very good impression as a user experience, so to speak, right? So, it makes sense to try and remove links and so on from the user interface, right? If the user clicks them, they aren't going to be allowed to do them anyway. Now, let me emphasize again, please don't do any of this before you submit your final project work if you are still going to be submitting another copy, right? Because I want to be able to click on things and confirm that, yes, you do actually have the code in place to say that, no, I'm not authorized or whatever, right? But, clearly it's something we would eventually want to do before rolling the product out. So I've got just some notes here on best practices and so on, and just, some code approaches that you can put into place. We'll just quickly talk about a little bit. I'm not going to do everything in the whole system, right? But we'll talk about how you might put this together and so on. So, maybe I've got the project open, our medical office example. So I thought, well, maybe we'll come look here, right? We have all I said. Let me emphasize again, the important stuff is what the protections we put into the controllers. But just to remove those links that are just kind of noise, in a sense, in the user interface, let's start with maybe the patient, right? Now, we know that you can't even come here until you're logged in, right? You have to be authenticated before you can even come here. Then in terms of authorization, remember our user is someone who's just logged in but not in any role. So they have to be able to get to the index page, no problem, right? Now a supervisor can get there as well as details, create and edit, and basically do everything except for delete, right? Whereas the admin can do everything, including delete, inside the actual patient itself. So I don't need to, I'm not even going to look at the controller. I know I've got all the right restrictions in place there with the different annotations and so on. So let's just talk about how we would modify the views themselves. All right, so coming back to Visual Studio then, what do I have here? What do I have open? Oh, that's function. Oh, function. I'm in the wrong. Oh, okay, sorry. That was, I clicked on a page. Anyway, all right, so here we are. So we're in our patient index view, right? So there's two things, okay? Right at the top here, we have this column heading, right? And that is where we added our create new button, okay? Oh, something little, but I'm going to do it as I go along here. I found that as I started to hide and show the buttons themselves, it didn't look very correct in that sometimes you'd only have 1, 2, or 3 buttons underneath this great big button at the top. I like having the button at the top of the column. I think it works well and it's a good idea. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of some styling here that's available with Bootstrap. This is a Bootstrap class. And of course, I just copied the wrong thing. Right? Text center. So what that does is it just centers this above the column, right? And I can take out new. I confess I only had new there to make it look like it filled the whole width. Okay, that's a little thing, but I'm going to do that in lots of places. All right, so should this create link be there? All right, well, it depends on the role, right? So basically, if they're admin or supervisor, then it should be, right? So we could start off putting code in, just a decision structure. That would be one approach that we can easily do, right? I can just come in here and say if they're in role admin or in role supervisor, right? And then throw the actual code that displays, okay, the header here for the column inside there, right? And I'll take it out of here. So that way, only if they're in one of those two roles do they actually see it, right? Now, coming down to the body of the table, okay, here's where we had our 3 different buttons for edit. Okay, it actually goes to the index of patient appointment. We call it details and delete, right? Well, we could do pretty much the exact same type of thing here, right? I could make the same decision. Oh, actually, I'll do it around because I want the whole column to disappear. So, I mean, that's why I'm including, forgot to copy. That's why I'm including the table data tag is going to be inside the logical structure, right? So I could put the same test if the user's in either of our two roles. Then we'll put the whole thing inside. And also, just before I forget, I want to make sure this stays centered as well. So I'll add that little bit of a bootstrap class here to the actual table data tag, right? There we go. So that takes care of that, except for one thing. I forgot something, didn't I? Well, I didn't really forget, but you know what I mean, okay? Delete button. That shouldn't be visible unless they're an actual admin. Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I'm going to have to add a little bit more logic here, aren't I? Right? I have to do an additional test just around the delete button. So I could do that a couple of ways. I'll just do some copy-paste magic here to save a bit of time. I'll just throw that inside of another if, right? And that does the job. Okay, so let's actually, I'm going to run it and just make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do. Okay, so here I log in. I will log in, first of all, as just a user. See, I know I couldn't have even gotten to the patient until I'd logged in, but now I can come to the patient and look, the entire column is gone. Exactly what I want. It doesn't even take up any screen real estate, so to speak. Now, if I come back in as supervisor user, come to patients, there we go. I have my create, I have my edit, and my details. Okay, I have everything here but delete. Now, that does not, like, for example, I come here, I can go to edit 138. I could try to cheat the system. I could put in the URL to delete. But of course, the real protection, the important protection, is actually in place in the controller, right? So just because I possibly could circumvent, right? Circumvent the fact that I've removed links from the screen, well, that doesn't actually protect at all, okay? But in harmony with that, why have it there if they're not going to be allowed to click on it? So let's just finally check admin and make sure we're getting the appearance that we want. Yep, so all the options are visible and available when we're in as an admin. Okay, good, good. Now, you might look at this, though, and think, well, God, you know, that's kind of like spaghetti code. Is it like we're doing if, admin, supervisor, and then another check for admin inside there, right? Yeah, there's more than one way, obviously, to do this kind of thing. You know, with just two real roles, this isn't bad. I could live with this. I wouldn't bother changing it. But later on, you might come into a situation where, you know, you've got multiple layers of roles, okay, some inside each other, some separate, and so on. And you can get into a real mess in terms of, you know, if this and this, but not this, and so on and so forth, right? It can be really ugly looking. So if it gets that complex, what I would usually suggest is come up with a single if for a given presentation, right? So I'm going to rearrange this. I'll just put the code in place and we'll talk about it. But maybe before I do, I'll just mention, see how I've just put the @ symbol, which, you know, jumps into Razor code, so to speak, or C# code inside the HTML, right? And that's fine. If you're just going to do a single if structure, no problem. But if you're going to have multiple decision structures inside code, I recommend taking a different approach altogether. Let me just take this whole thing out for a second. Oh, I deleted too much. I didn't want to take out that table data tag, right? So this is more or less how it was when I came along to ignore the extra white lines there. If you're going to have anything larger than a single command, single if or anything else, I always recommend in terms of Razor, just putting your two brackets. And then inside there, put your code block, right? So the first one I'll do is, what if they're a supervisor? Then this is exactly what they should see. So it's just a twist on the overall approach, right? if they're in one particular role, or yeah, it might be a combination of roles. If there were multiple different roles, it would all have the same view of what's available and what's not, right? Then put that all together into one. Have whatever tests are needed to determine, is this the presentation you're after? Okay, good. All right. Now let me just take all this out because it'll just confuse me if I don't. Okay, so that's fine if they're a supervisor, right? So then we'll just have an else if. And this is all, notice the yellow highlighting. This is the closing curly brace for the entire code block, right? So then I can throw in else if, okay? So they weren't in supervisor, I check if they're an admin. And if they're an admin, then they get all three buttons, right? Now, is that better? Not necessarily. In this case, it probably wasn't necessary to do this, but it does have the advantage, especially when things get more and more complex, right? That it's a nice clean separation. Okay, this is the presentation of links we're going to give depending on they're in one role, or maybe if there's multiple roles, they'll all get the same presentation, right? And then down here, okay, this is a different presentation, so if there are any of the roles involved in that type of thing. So it's just a twist on it, a different way of putting it together. Any questions about that? Okay. So, that's really what it comes down to. You can nest your ifs, you can put them like this. It doesn't really matter to me in the end which approach you take. But another thing that can come up, sometimes, we took advantage of the fact that, we could just hide and show this one column, basically, right? Depending on their roles and so on and so forth. But, sometimes there's multiple things. There's links all over the page that have to be hidden and shown. Maybe there's entire regions of other controls that should only appear if they're an administrator and things like that, right? It's not just necessarily these links involved. Okay, you might have blocks of explanatory text that only appear for certain people and so on and so forth, right? So if it gets really messy, then rather than getting, your whole view full of, well, I'll use that term again, spaghetti code, right? Decision this, decision that, show this, hide this, et cetera, sometimes it's better just to make a clean, total separation and have multiple versions of the view itself, right? So I thought to illustrate that, we'll come back here to our instructions again. Let's maybe take doctor, for example, right? So a logged in user, okay, can get to the index and nowhere else. A supervisor can do the index and the details, right? But that's it. And then the admin can basically do everything. Okay, so just to show a different approach altogether, let's deal with this one. So what we could do is with the doctor, right? So I'll close this. I'm done with that one for now. Oh, excuse me. I'm back again. Okay. So let's come down here to the index, right? So we have this one index view. Right now, everything is here. The actual restrictions, of course, are in the controller in terms of what they can and cannot do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, this is the one that's wide open, that has everything available, right, that we would need, say, for an administrator, okay? Well, I'm going to copy it. I'll make a copy of that. And this is something that's a bit of a trick or a tip for you. If you're going to make a copy of a view and make an identical copy it first, but make sure that you right-click on the folder containing all the views and select paste there. That way you get it in the right place, okay? So I've made a copy. I'm going to do it again. Paste a second time. Now I've got 3 copies of the same view, right? Now, right now they're identical, but I'm going to rename them. I'm going to call one index admin. And this one will be index supervisor. And finally, I just have plain old index, right? So I got 3 copies. So what I could do is I could come in here and say, well, you know what? My index, I'll just use that for just a plain authenticated user, not in any role. So I can get rid of this whole column completely, right? Because they won't need it. So come down here, the whole column, the entire thing, I can just take out, right? And if there's anything else on this page that they weren't allowed to do, I could just delete it. But I think that's it, right? Now, coming to supervisor, right? They need everything. Oh, I want to remember to put in my my little thing here, my little bit of script, just to center the column. I didn't have to worry about it for that first one because I just took the column completely out, right? Okay, so here, just adding my centering and take out the word new. Okay. All right, so that is available, right? Oh, wait, for a supervisor. Let me look again, make sure I have it right. Supervisor, no, they can have details, but they don't get to have, for doctor, they don't get to have create. Okay, so I do empty it out, right? I can just completely take it out. I didn't really need to add the text center then, did I? But it's not going to hurt, I'll leave it there. Coming down here, right? The only thing that they should have, still I'm going to put my text center in. The only thing they should have is details. So I can just take out edit. I can take out the delete. And there we go. So you see the advantage of this approach is I'm just cleaning up the view. I'm removing things completely, right? Depending on which copy of the view I need. Now, point of warning. So this one itself, this has definitely nothing, right? This is just for, the actual user, okay, and not logged in users. They get the index, which is what we're seeing, but they have no other options, right? So here I could take out the column completely. Where am I? Index for doctor. Yep, okay. Oh, I must have done it already. Yeah, so I took it out. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Brain fart. Yeah, I did it already. So I took everything out. On the supervisor, we left the column there, but the only button that's going to be available is details. And then, of course, index admin has everything available, right? So how do we decide which one the user is going to get to see? Well, that is now handled in the controller. So if I come down to the doctor controller, okay, to the bottom of the index action, I'll put my logic in here. So right now, when I'm done, I just say return view, right? Sure, that's fine. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to decide, depending on the role, which copy, which version of the view they're going to get. So if they're an admin, okay, I'm going to return view index admin. Now, you see, that's something up till now we've almost never actually passed the name of a view when we just say return view. It's always been empty brackets. We've been taking advantage up to now of the built-in naming convention that MVC supports, that if it's in a given controller's view folder, okay, or, sorry, to relate them, the given action inside of a controller, if we just say return view, it automatically goes to views, looks for a folder with the same name as the controller, and it looks for a view with the same name as the action, right? So we never actually had to specify the actual name of the view, but you see we can, right? So if they're admin, I'll return this version of the index admin. If they're in supervisor, I'll return that one. Else, okay, then they get just the plain vanilla index, which has all the links removed, right? So that's a different approach. Advantage is we don't have all that complex logic, all these ifs and decision structures embedded right in the HTML of the pages themselves, the views. Disadvantage, I think it's pretty clear. Now I've got 3 different versions of my index. It's fine if I'm basically done, right? If I'm almost done all my development work, but now if somebody comes along and says, "Oh, we want a new column, right, on the index view." Okay, now I have to go into each and every one and make sure I do it the same way, right? So yeah, for maintenance, for maintaining the website, this is a disadvantage, right? Because now we have 3 different versions, and it's so easy to make a mistake. Remember to do the changes in 1 or 2 of them and not all 3 of them, type of thing. And imagine if you have even more, 4 or 5 different versions, right? It can be a real nightmare in terms of maintaining it. But the advantage is each view is extremely simple. It's much more efficient because it's not making decisions and so on as it's actually parsing and generating the view, right? So, sometimes it's worthwhile, sometimes it's not. I'm not going to say that there's one solution that fits everybody, so you'll have to decide yourself. So if I come in as admin, come to doctors, everything's available here. I can go and see everything. Away we go. Bada bing, bada boom. If I come back out, log in as super, which is a supervisory role, coming to doctors, notice that all I have is details. I don't have a create, I don't have edit or anything else, just doctor details, and away we go. And of course, if I come back in just as an authenticated user, there's no column whatsoever. I can't create, edit, details, delete, nothing. Okay, all I can do is look at the page. All right. So the only last thing really left is what do we see here? Look I've got all these choices here. Should we actually have them available? Obviously not, right? So where does that happen? Well, you know the answer. Layout. Okay, come down to shared, layout. Here's our menu system for the entire application. So what are we going to do here? Well, basically, until they're authenticated, they should be able to even see anything, right? Except for what they're at, the home menu itself, right? So I'd be awfully tempted to throw an if right around the entire, maybe I'll do it inside this unordered list tag, okay? I'll let it establish the dropdown, but then I'm going to go right in here and say if they're authenticated, and all the other code could go inside, right? So they won't see any of those menu options, okay, including, oh, wait. I'm inside the wrong one. It's up here because we don't want the patient even available, right? Yeah, they shouldn't even be able to click on patient until they're logged in. So yeah, I was in the wrong spot. Let me come down here. Here's where I'll then put, okay, an if, and all of this, including the link for patients, and then this whole structure down to here, that all goes inside that first decision. So unless they're logged in, notice the change. It's user.identity Boolean is authenticated. So that means they've logged in, right? As long as they're logged in, then the rest of the menu system shows up, okay? Now, so patient, yeah, even a user can always see patient, and we'll have to have the office menu choice at the top so they can even get to doctor, because a user who's not in any role can still come to doctor, right? So maybe at that point, here is where I'll start adding an additional choice, okay? Now, I'm just going to do it with a two-part if. So they'll see doctor, and then if they're in either admin or user, or supervisor, I should say, in that case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the whole menu, right, that they can have up to a certain point, up to everything that's common, okay? So that's everything basically down to here. Let me just go end. Right? So if they're an admin or supervisor, they get to, there's a divider, they get to go to the appointment, right? They already have doctor, both, even in user not in any role gets doctor. Then we have everything else right down. The one thing that they shouldn't be able to get to is user role, right? To be able to maintain what roles users are in. So that's where we'll do another if, specifically just to make sure only if they are admin will they have access to that. So I'll leave the divider along with it. I'll just cut this and put that inside that decision structure. Okay, so that I think does the job. Now, again, you could do it with that other approach. If they're in supervisor, show plunk, okay? If they're an admin, and repeat and have all the links that would be available for an admin. With only two roles like this, I don't find there's really a major advantage one way or the other. Both would be valid in terms of how you want to get it set up. I'm just going to do a quick test, make sure it is working. And there we go. Look at that. I'm not logged in. I have nothing available here. Okay. I can get to privacy, right? The link is still here in the footer. I can get to the privacy policy. I can get back to the welcome page here for the whole site, basically the home index page. But until I log in, I can't try to get anywhere else, not by clicking links on the page, at least, right? So I'll start with the most basic. So I can get to patients. Again, we've hit everything. I can get to doctors. Again, there's nothing else available. I'll log out, log back in as my super. And just checking, yeah. So I have everything here in the menu that I can get to except assigning users to roles, because that's strictly an admin functionality, right? But I can do all this stuff. Yeah, cancel, I don't want to do that. Et cetera, right? So finally, I'll log back in as admin just to confirm for sure that everything should be available. Yep, so I can even come down to maintaining my user roles and so on and so forth. All right, so that's it. That's the end of the demo. So I just wanted to kind of walk through that. There's a few more comments in that document that I posted. Feel free to have a look at them all. But I think as a demo, that's sufficient to just kind of walk through the overall process. Again, there's no right or wrong as if you want to just do separate if this one role and give all the configuration suitable for the one role and then check another role, et cetera, et cetera. It's entirely up to you. It makes no difference. But this is kind of a neat trick, this one here. Okay, big advantage that you get completely clean index pages, right? In this case, index pages at least, and no decision structures to stick in there and get messed up. Disadvantage is now you've got multiple copies or versions of the view that you have to maintain. But that's the final solution. Pardon me, I should be careful about saying things like that in terms of our authentication and authorization. Okay,